views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. What to do at the Harlem River waterfront? It might be one of the most hotly debated topics in the Bronx. Bordering Port Morris and Mott Haven in the South Bronx, this stretch of land and water is filled with potential, but over the years has been filled mostly with debris, with industry, with railroads, and neglect. We had planned to feature the New York Restoration Project's Haven project proposal, but at the last minute, their director fell ill and was unable to make it. Nonetheless, we press on with our program about the Harlem River waterfront with the state's open space conservation plan and two Bronx advocates to analyze the plan and overall talk about the potential uses for this long ignored but highly prized part of the Bronx. The phones are open tonight and we welcome your input. Everyone seems to have something to say about the Harlem River waterfront, so you can call in 718-960-7621. You can also email questions or comments to us at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org or put them on the BronxTalk Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. For the here and now a co-founder of South Bronx Unite and a longtime Bronx environmental advocate. Welcome back to Michael Johnson. Nice to have you, Michael.
Thank you, Gary. Nice to be here.
And also a member of Community Board 1, a professor and co-founder of South Bronx Unite, Dr. Angel Lopez. Dr. Lopez, thank you for joining us.
Nice.
All right, Michael, let's go to it. You have been involved in this and developing the waterfront for as long as I've known you. What are the issues and what would you look for in a plan that ultimately would be accepted and implemented to revitalizing the Harlem River waterfront?
Well, first of all, I think it has to be really inclusive in terms of having community input to make sure the people who live there have a voice in what that looks like. One person or one administration can't answer that question. One entity like SOBRO or whatever cannot answer that question. It should be basically put out to the people in the community. And it should just give our residents who have had no access to green space or access to their peninsula for several decades because of the industrial facilities and the highways that have been created block us from this access. So we need to make sure that access is created and make sure people are in the community are involved in that decision making.
How much work would be needed to be done to make that space, not only access to it, but make it worthwhile and livable and something that people would be proud and happy to be part of?
I think it just takes political will, Gary, and really smart, ingenuitive minds coming together to say, well, we have these spaces that can create jobs, that can mitigate for storm surge, that can create recreational opportunities to a community that has health woes worse than any other county or area. I mean, we're talking about high rates of diabetes, obesity, asthma. We really need access to diversify from these negative effects of being surrounded by highways and having the largest industrial zone in the city.
You were on our show in the past, talking, and you've been, and South Bronx Unite was founded to oppose Fresh Direct moving to the Bronx. It appears, and I don't necessarily want to debate that project here and now, it appears it's on its way to being here, pending some last minute discussion or decision. How much does that get in the way of having the kind of plan that you and Mr. Lopez or others would like? Or at this point, well, it's here, we're going to kind of build around it?
It's an example, and that's why we fought this so long and still are fighting it. It's an example of what Robert Moses did to our community and to the Bronx many decades ago. to where we didn't listen or there was no community input, and you just run in and you build, or you break ground, or you say, we don't need community input. We're going to build on a Native American burial ground. We're going to build on a flood zone. We're going to ask the city and the state to give $140 million or several $1 million to companies to do just that without listening to the people in the community. So that's exactly what happened decades ago, and we're still recreating the same wheel of making these really no thoughtful and I think wrong-headed decisions without really finding out why people oppose projects like these. It's not because we don't like Fresh Direct. It's not because we don't like trucks, even though we don't, but we have children. 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 have asthma. And so we need access. We need recreational space. We don't need another facility being built on a flood zone after Sandy and thinking that's okay to do.
Last question before we get to Dr. Lopez. Why, or is there a reason why now we're getting, we have the Haven Projects plan, this plan, it finally seems to be moving forward, at least from a visionary standpoint. There's a lot to do before we actually get something implemented. Is there a reason why now, or it's just, well, we've pushed long enough and it came to fruition?
I think a lot of people for decades have been fighting for access for this community. I really take my hat off to NYRP, New York Restoration Project, for coming to the community asking if you had a dream or an idea of how do you connect this community to the connector, which we'll be opening up, hopefully, sometime.
We're going to show at least an artist's rendering of that connector and explain what that is in a minute, but go ahead.
And how would this community get to the connector? Since we live here, we know best or better, right? And so they listen to us. And I think with the Mighty Haven Port Morris Waterfront Plan, which we're going to talk about, one and the same. It was actually conjured up or created with community input and community vision. And that's how all things should start. I think change starts from the ground up, not from the top down.
Dr. Lopez, let's take a little bit of a technical view of trying to figure out how to do this. How, in terms of urban planning and urban renewal projects of environmental areas, as this is along the Bronx Kill and everything else, how difficult a design is this? Or is this really a relatively simple design? It was just a matter of wending the way through the various political considerations to get there. Or is this a very complicated area given all the factors to design?
Overall, it's a complex idea, but basically you have to tackle it analytically by dividing the different access points while keeping like a general view of the area. There are parts like, for example, the gantries is a very specific site because you have historical considerations there. You're looking.
And we're going to show pictures of those as well. But
yes,
just to let people know.
So you have, for example, the area where Fresh Direct says that they're going to build. We're still fighting them. That's a very different area that right now is politically charged, but there are other areas like, for example, the Lincoln Avenue access point. We worked on that area just 2 weeks ago. A bunch of neighbors, we went there and we did what the government for decades has been unwilling to do, which is to beautify the place and actually make it a place that people in the area want to visit. It didn't take much. It took like, what, 5 gallons of paint and
so that wasn't difficult.
And several garbage bags.
And several garbage bags, and so it depends. Like the idea is quite complex when you look at it, like from a bird's eye view perspective, but you just basically attack it at the different points. And we have people. Like a neighbor across from my house, Juan Carlos Tallano, an architect, he has been looking at the way that people use or not use, the impediments that there are for people to get to some of these points. And this plan that we have here, that we're going to see in a few minutes, starts from actually gathering all those decades of observation of people that have been there, using it and not using it, and we built on that.
Right. You know, just listing the things, and folks who have been watching the show may remember a little while back, Michael Johnson took me on a tour and we showed pictures of the area. For me, it was really an eye-opener. But the railroad tracks, there's certainly various dumps. There are very industrial facilities. Who's it? FedEx has a facility there, which
Waste
is obviously
management.
Waste management is there. Obviously, Fresh Direct. It looks like it's coming, and yet there's an apartment complex there. So you're dealing with all the cars and all the movement and people involved with there. There is a playground, even though my last look at it was that it was not being kept very well, but you have a playground there. Then you have the whole waterfront, and as Michael talked about, it's a potential flood zone, and so you have all those considerations. Very, very, I thought it would, just looking at any plan, would have to be very complicated, because not only do you have to get approval from the community or input from the community, you just have to deal with all of these factors.
All the different pieces of the puzzle. Like when I worked with some students, architectural students, on some of these sites, like we work with input from the community. One of the things that we really underlined was that all of these access points are not potential flood zones, but they are flood zones.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Technical flood zones.
yes, and so you don't think about flood zones as a byproduct of the design process. You start the design process by considering and taking it as a flood zone.
It's almost like that's the elephant in the room, and
Yes.
everything you talk about, it has to be considered and dealt with. the whole
And so
time.
when you start thinking about building huge and tall towers of housing there, for example, like that makes the process even more dangerous, because that area got flooded. Many of those areas got flooded.
Right.
As you said, there are heavy toxic industrial usages there that in the next flood, that's all going to come towards the already
We'll all share
residential
all those
areas.
toxic gifts, if you will.
Yes.
Michael, before I really want to start showing stuff, what's the top thing that the community said? And you said you got community input. What's the one major thing that kept coming up that you said, this is what we have to do if we do this? Is there one item?
I don't know about one item. I think the overarching theme is the fact that let's get to
the water. Yes.
right? Because
Let's get just access to the
let's
waterfront.
get access to the waterfront. Maybe not access to the water itself, but access to the waterfront where we can at least view, see the water. Because as human beings, we feel better when we're close to it, right? But what's connected is the fact that not only is it recreational, but it's also, again, like Dr. Lopez mentioned, is that it's a mitigator. It's a mitigator. We're in flood zone. Sandy is going to happen again. It's inevitable. But it's really not smart not to have a plan, and there is no mitigation plan that's been constructed by the government or the city.
Along with that access, there has to be this consideration of the flood zone so that you do it smartly.
We want permeable surfaces, right? It's going to absorb storm surge, and that's important since we all live on, well, the Bronx is not an island, but everyone else is living on an island.
We're subject to all the other islands.
Right.
All right, let's do this. Let's start showing pictures, and Helen and the folks in the booth, let's just go slow. This was really where the dialogue starts. So, Michael, you start and tell me, this is the...
This is a rendering of the
connector.
Of the connector that's soon to be opened.
I thought it was open. It's not open
It
yet.
has not been completed and is not open as of yet.
And it
We would
connects
hope
what?
it would connect the South Bronx community of Mott Haven and Port Morris to Randall's Island.
Now think of how crazy, you can leave that picture up there for a moment. Think of how crazy it is, folks, that if you live in the Bronx, which is really 100 yards, maybe not even, from Randall's Island, which has all those beautiful recreational facilities, you got to get in the car and get in the highway and drive around and figure out how to get there.
Or catch a bus to Manhattan, right?
Right, catch a bus to Manhattan and to get there. Okay, now the next picture we have is is this one. Now I do want to go in. I don't know how well people can see it on their TVs. So I don't know, Dr. Lopez, can we go through it? What is marked A there is the Bronx Kill Waterfront Park. This is really what the design would be. So
Yes.
what strikes you in all of this stuff?
Well, basically, we're trying to create a network there that facilitates access from distinct points in the residential areas of the community. Those different points also, all along 138th Street, there are obviously like subway stops. So each one of those points, in a way, is connected to the public transportation hubs on 138th Street. And so also we are we're talking about that path there,
where F,
the
G, and E, right?
Yes. So the G basically is that path that connects and secures like our waterfront and our residential areas from future floods. It's not only the passive parks and the open space, but with the G path, we are creating areas that actually protect the community from the next flood. That don't invite the water.
Not only would you be able to walk all the way, you can see from F on the right side, which is
that's the Port Morris gantries.
Those are the gantries.
All the way around, which would be wonderful. I guess
Correct.
you could walk and bike and take a look.
I have. It's a really great walk.
But of course, it's not as green as you'd like it to be.
Correct. And there's quite a few fences that are blocking the community from it. I mean, but if you look at F, Gary, and you look just north of F, and you see these green circles on the screen,
right?
That is Castle Home Heating Oil. It stores more than 100 million gallons of home heating oil right on the waterfront with no mitigation plan for storm surge.
Wow.
So
if there's a storm, that
that's
looks about as vulnerable as
the
anything.
flood zone map takes it all the way inland to where you see the highway, which encircles our community. So just west, you see a loop. We don't have a pointer, but it takes you in about 5 or 6 blocks is what the FEMA flood map shows the flood zone to be.
Right.
But if just south of that F is a Con Ed substation. That's not protected
That's
either.
also not protected. What's very interesting to me is, just looking at this without having the conversation with you, you wouldn't think of all the flood zone considerations, but as articulated by Dr. Lopez, that is paramount in this design. So just real quickly, so that we could go through a C and D are Lincoln Avenue Waterfront Park. D is an Alexander Avenue extension. A is a full waterfront park, complete with basketball courts and a little soccer area and all that kind of
Could
stuff.
I interject one thing, Gary? Every area you just mentioned, A, C, D, B, they're all underutilized, meaning they're vacant right now. There's nothing happening right now.
There.
Wow.
Nothing. And A actually is the proposed Fresh Direct site, and which we're still saying should be something different than a 500,000 square foot warehouse. But the other areas are, if you go there right now and we show photos, which I think we will we'll show vacant areas that should not exist.
So if Fresh Direct is put there, you simply would build this around it.
We're saying we're not even going to relinquish the
you're not willing
position
to
that they're
concede.
coming.
No,
we're not going to concede that. We're still going to fight them tooth and
Let's
nail.
move to the next photos and we'll run through some of these because I want to give people a...
This is the Bronx Kill. And like Dr. Lopez mentioned, is the green, this is where the green path that would connect. And that's Randall's Island to your left.
To the left. So on the right is that area where you would put a pathway so people could literally walk out and look over the water.
What's the difference? You see there, one side is the Bronx, the other side is Randall's Island. Ours looks really like it's unkept
I was just going to say you could go to Brooklyn and take a nice long walk and it would be just that kind of thing. And here in the Bronx, it's marshland.
Speaking of Brooklyn, they created Brooklyn Bridge Park in under a year.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right? And here we've been waiting almost 2 decades for
let's keep going with more pictures.
This here is also
go ahead.
the Kill. And this is looking towards Queens. That is a fossil fuel power plant in Queens, but it's Randall's Island right there. Yeah, Astoria.
And so the area from where the photograph is taken is, again, a waterfront areas that you just can't get next to. People. All right, keep going. Let's let her rip. This was a picture we pulled off your website.
It's a red-tailed hawk that actually, and you see in its claws is a pigeon it's standing on. It actually had a nest in the connector area of the connector. And
which shows the potential of the environment, much like we had Jose the beaver on the Bronx River.
Right.
So the idea, if you build it, these will
Nature
come.
reclaims its own, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, go ahead. Now these are the gantries that we're talking about.
The gantries.
So now, maybe Dr. Lopez, you can explain what this is, and then we have another artist rendering of what it could look like. So what is this?
So basically, this was used many years ago, like to offer a platform so boats can land here in the South Bronx. It has been abandoned for decades, and so
This is a rotting structure of metal and
yes,
everything else.
and the people, our friends from Brook Park, have worked for a long time on having these structures historic value recognized, and they have offered us renderings. My students
let's go
also
to the
work.
next one, which is a rendering, if we can. Go ahead, and what were you saying? So now this is what you'd like to do.
Yes, these are renderings that were prepared by friends of Brook Park to show the different possibilities that we can have in that area. Like right now, they're lying there, rotting away, and that's not the case in the Gantries Park in Long Island City.
That's right.
It's
Gantry
not
State
the
Park.
case. They use the Gantries also in Staten Island, but not us. It's always not the Bronx.
I am just holding my $ question till we get through all the pictures. So keep going, which is a crucial part of this. Now, what is this?
This is Lincoln Avenue. This is a rendering done by MIT, actually.
Yes.
And this is looking from the water back into the Bronx? Am I getting
Correct.
Yes.
And this was actually done for Harlem River Working Group, which is another coalition partner of ours, and the Bronx Council for Environmental Quality, which I'm a board member of. They worked together to create this whole green mapping of the Harlem River, and this would be a destination place at Lincoln Avenue, what it could look like versus what it looks like now.
Yeah, I shudder to think. All right, let's go to the next.
Those are people fishing on the waterfront. People use that waterfront.
Even though it's not accessible.
Yes, against all odds, people just reach out to the
Is this a
water.
photograph? It looks like a combo photograph and artist rendering.
No, this is actually a photograph.
Actually a photograph.
I actually
photograph.
took this photograph, and they actually had to crawl underneath a barbed wire fence to do this. This is what the extent we have to go to, families have to go to recreate on our
To
waterfront.
have a nice, simple day.
Right.
I hate to ask, is it legal for them to be doing what they're doing?
Yeah, no one bothers them. They don't bother anyone. They fish. They pull out fish out of the water and they eat.
And this is?
That's a vertical farm that one of my students did, like a very experimental rendering there, showing the possibilities as well, like preserving the gantries. We even toyed with the idea of having the gantries like a drive-in or boat-in cinema, cinema that people can see movies from the waterfront in kayaks and from the street also.
Wouldn't that be beautiful? All right, keep going. Now this is our final photograph, and I put it almost as a joke, because it's got to be a joke. This is an actual sign that is, when you come to the Bronx from the Triborough Bridge, I know, Michael, you have some pretty strong feelings about this.
Yeah, I mean, welcome to the Bronx is great, but available, I think, is sentiment of how some people look at us.
Well, also because the condition of the sign, listen, all right, so there's a billboard that nobody's bought, but it gives just such a strange vision of our borough. Anyway, Helen, thank you for the pictures. What we do on this show and what I do all the time is just to put things out there so people can start to think, oh, wow, this is possible, we could try and do this, et cetera, et cetera. What, from a building standpoint, is it going to take to do this? And then, of course, along with that, somebody's going to have to pay for it. How do you see that whole spectrum of actually taking this vision, or even the Haven Project's vision, which has some similar parts and some differences, and implementing it and making it happen?
And that's what's historic. The Mount Haven Port Morris waterfront plan has been received suggested priority status by the 2013 Open Space Advisory Committee, which is led by the Department of Environmental Conservation.
From the state?
From the state. There's been other priority projects, some of which has been Roberto Clemente State Park, right? There's several others that were priority projects, and what happened, it opens the way to a transference from one state agency to another, and then you go after funding. You know, I think it's happened everywhere else in the 5 boroughs.
So what you're saying is getting people to say, or getting the powers that be to say, we like this idea, and then you look for funding, or does it have to be done kind of in coordination?
I think first the recognition and designation needs to happen. That's most important and paramount. Again, there's never been a priority project in Mount Haven Port Morris to create open space by water. There's always been everywhere else. I mean, the open space plan is great. Region 2, which is the all 5 boroughs, in the Bronx alone, we have some really great projects going on that have been priority projects that have been designated. A lot of advocates have worked for decades, and we're just saying we are happy those things are happening. We just really want also things to happen in the South Bronx.
Dr. Lopez, just back to, I guess, the original question. So now we say, okay, it's approved and all that. What needs to be done to really do this right? And in other words, what has to be put in place so that you and other advocates and the people of the Bronx will say, wow, what a great thing.
We have to have like a very transparent, democratic process, so people in the community feel ownership, and that they feel a stake on these projects. They don't feel, we have to avoid the situation in which people feel that all of this development
it's being done to them
is
or
happening,
for them, but not by
yes,
them.
and it's happening for a new wave of potential gentrificators or developers. It's happening for them.
Fellas, we gotta go.
Okay.
Dr. Angel Lopez, thank you. Michael Johnson, thank you,
for
folks.
having us.
There is contact info. We can go to the South Bronx Unite website, and then you can interact and learn more about it.
That's right.
We really appreciate you being here.
It's a pleasure.
And,
It's a pleasure.
I love talking about visions for the Bronx. That's what we're trying to do.
Yes.
We can't do it until we visualize it, and
right.
that's what we did tonight. And so if you do have further questions or comments on anything you heard on the show tonight or anything going on in the Bronx, send us an email at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org or put it on our Facebook page, and we read those on the air during a future edition of our program. We ask you to like Bronx Talk on Facebook so you can stay in touch with what we're doing, and our archives are at BronxNet.org. We're on the lower right navigation bar. Now, next week, a totally different sort of show. We will bring you the story of a fascinating Bronx small business that few know about, called New York News Monitors. They do some amazing work connecting not only the Bronx, but clients all over the world with news footage and TV clips. We're going to show some of those clips and some of the world's most well-known stories, and you'll get to meet the two brothers who founded this unique family business. I assure you, you won't see this anywhere else but here in the BX. That's next week on Bronx Talk. Thanks to fill-in producer Helen and our director Bianca and the cast of thousands around here. We'll see you next week.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.